The Adeptus Astartes form the bulwark against the tide of darkness. Noble warriors, clad in gleaming ceramite, charge willingly into the breach of untold dangers, with the most valiant of their creed defending the weak through acts of sacrifice. For today, we shall elucidate the chapters of the Space Marines, derived from the lineage of the compassionate, yet imposing Lord of Drakes, Vulcan. The successor chapters of the 18th Legion, the Salamanders.
On the anvil of war are the strong-tempered, and the weak made to perish. Thus are men's souls tested, as metal in the forge's fire.
The angels of death are regarded as the Emperor's will made manifest, descending from the heavens onto the bleakest of battlefields to fell the enemies of humanity in its hours of greatest need. Gleaming in their panoplies of war, they are resplendent reminders to the servants of the Imperium that they shall be protected from the darkness. Yet of all the chapters of the Space Marines, there is one above all that protects the weak and embodies the mercy of the Emperor. The 18th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes, the Salamanders. Known during the Unification Wars as the Dragon Warriors, the 18th Legion, like all of the proto-legions of the Adeptus Astartes, would be secluded from their peers, particularly the Dragon Warriors and their so-called trefoil kin of the 6th and 20th Legions. Their deeds and battle honors obscured from history, the 18th Legion, due to their secretive origins, would be regarded with suspicion by the other legions, garnering a reputation with their first engagement at the assault of the Tempest Galleries during 800 M30. The Dragon Warriors would achieve a near impossible victory alone against all odds of survival. Suffering incredible losses and reducing their number from over 20,000 Astartes to as little as 1,000 Battle Brothers, the Dragon Warriors would secure a reputation as bloodied yet glorious and honorable combatants. Rapidly replenishing their numbers, the Dragon Warriors would be supplied with new war gear as the favored sons of the newly born Imperium, yet be stalled in taking part in the many expeditions of the early days of the Great Crusade. Rarely serving as a legion, the 18th would be split into smaller battalions to reinforce battle groups across the Imperium, often assigned to crucial engagements against Space Hulks or Xenos raiding parties behind the lines of the advancing waves of forces of the Crusade. Cooperating closely with human military forces as the only Space Marines in service, the Dragon Warriors would brave the most hazardous and deadly theaters of war, earning the Legion many accolades as saviors, bastions of hope, and the personification of the Emperor's protection and grace. Yet as a result of their conflicts, the Legion would never replenish to its full strength akin to the standards of the other legions. Their survival and continuation as a legion, uncertain, during their 4th decade of service, until the return of their Primarch, Vulcan. Found on the death world of Nocturne, Vulcan would not be reunited with his legion for many years. Tutored by the Emperor himself, the Primarch of the 18th Legion would be tempered with the ruler of mankind's boundless wisdom, and in the hour of his legion's greatest need, he would be returned to them. On the cluster of planets near the Taurus division, the 18th Legion of 19,000 Astartes would be besieged by a horde of millions of the Orc Xenos. Facing overwhelming odds, the Dragon Warriors would be under the command of their chapter master, Cassian Vaughn. Evacuating the civilian populations of the system, the 18th Legion would suffer terrible losses for their compassion. Refusing to stand idle whilst his sons perished, Vulcan would aid his legion alongside 3,000 initiates from his homeworld of Nocturne. Spurring the Dragon Warriors' survivors, Vulcan would lead the counterattack and purge the Xenos from the system. The two halves of the Legion would unite in the aftermath of the battle, with Vulcan revealing himself to his long-lost sons. The Dragon Warriors would kneel before their Genefather, yet be bid to stand by Vulcan, declaring that all of his sons were equals, for Vulcan would not be regarded as some petty king demanding obedience. Instead, Vulcan would kneel before his legion to honor the lives that had been lost as payment to protect the innocents that had fled the system. Henceforth, the legion would be remade under the tutelage of their Primarch. These were Dragon Warriors no longer. The 18th would now bear a different name, a name derived from their Primarch's homeworld of Nocturne. the Salamanders. Divided into 7 great companies led by a Lord Commander or Protector, born from each of Nocturne's settlements, the Salamanders would field 34 companies during the Great Crusade. Always acknowledged as the smallest in number amongst all of the legions of Adeptus Astartes, the Salamanders would compensate for their scale by implementing new battle doctrines and strategies. Encouraging self-sufficiency and autonomy, Vulcan would enable each settlement to foster their own cultural traditions within their companies, further buttressing the legion's relationships to their human counterparts within their lands. Yet with the dawn of a new age for the Salamanders, a new darker future would begin with the embers of betrayal and heresy. Called to face the traitor War Master, Horus Lupercal, the Salamanders would accompany the Iron Hands and Raven Guard legions to prevent the rebellion of the traitor Astartes and their Primarchs from growing in number. Sent as the spear tip to crush the 4 traitor legions of the Death Guard, World Eaters, Emperor's Children, and Sons of Horus, the Loyalists would crush the rebellion with the amassed strength of 7 legions, soon to be reinforced by the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Word Bearers, and Alpha Legion. However, the Loyalist legions would be betrayed by their allies during the Dropside Massacre of Istvan V, with the Salamanders losing their Primarch and being broken under the heel of the traitors. Shattered into fragments of their newly rebuilt glory, the 18th Legion and its fellow fractured legionaries would retreat from the massacre, with first captain of the Salamanders, Artellus Numion, leading the scattered forces of his legion to safety. Finding shelter on the ultramarine planet of Macragge, the Salamanders would bear the shame of their defeat and loss of their Primarch, as the galaxy would be split in 2. Imperium Secundus would be formed by Rabute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, with Ultramar as the newly formed contingent empire should the Imperium fall to the wrath of the traitors. Yet in their darkest hour, the Salamanders would find a sliver of hope with the return of their Primarch, Vulcan. Vulcan's return to his legion would be as much a gift as an omen. His mind and body broken, the legion's survival would fall to Artellus Numion to forge a path to redemption. Venturing to their homeworld of Nocturne, Numion would sacrifice his own life to reawaken his Primarch and renew the fire within his legion. Primarch Vulcan would journey to Holy Terror to aid in its defense, leaving his Salamanders to independently face their duty in defending the Imperium. Allying themselves with their battle-forged brothers of the Iron Hands and Raven Guard, the Salamanders would conduct guerrilla war strikes against the traitor forces until the end of the Horus Heresy, reforging their legion in the subsequent millennia to face the darkness alone until their Primarch should return to them. Too few in number to be divided into successor chapters, the Salamanders would rebuild, their numbers able to bear new chapters at the dawn of the 42nd millennium, with the introduction of the Primaris Space Marines into their ranks. Though some mysterious chapters bear the heraldry of the 18th Legion, their origins likely born from stockpiles of the Salamanders' gene seed. Regardless of their lackluster numbers, the Salamanders have grown synonymous with the Legion's reputations as true bulwarks against the ruinous powers. Their compassion for humanity and unbreakable duty to preserve the will of the Emperor, known across the Imperium. For it is believed by the Salamanders chapter that one day their Primarch shall return to them, once all the artifacts of Vulcan have been found, and with their return to their chapter, their retribution shall be at hand. The Salamander's gene seed bears a unique trait unlike many of those of the founding legions. Similar to the gene seed of the Alpha Legion and Space Wolves, the gene seed of the Salamanders was constructed by the Emperor for a unique purpose. The exact purpose has been lost to history, with only the Emperor likely aware of its design, but with the efforts of the Magos Biologists, a theoretical has been achieved. The determination from such study shows that the Salamander's gene seed is uncorrupted and stable in nature. Oddly, the Salamander's reaction time seemed to be slower than other Astartes as a direct defect from their gene seed, though some within the Biologists regard this as a result of the chapter's homeworld's high gravity or psycho-conditioning, though this trait is mitigated once an 18th Legion Astartes is equipped with power armor. The radiation of Nocturne has also caused the Legion's characteristic jet black skin and bright red, burning eyes. A superficial characteristic, it nonetheless has proven useful during deployments to rebellious worlds in intimidating the populace and allowing for compliance without the use of force. Yet the salamanders do bear positive traits as a result of their unique gene crafting, such as firesight, the ability for the sons of Vulcan to see infrared emissions of specific heat signatures without the aid of helmet visors, allowing for the salamanders to implement thermic materials into their armor and vehicles to enable the chapter to conduct midnight raids and skirmishes while still being able to clearly identify allied combatants and vehicles. Also allowing the chapter to use such materials to create tactical markings and communications that can otherwise not be seen by the naked eye. Alike to some of its contemporary legions, such as the Space Wolves and Blood Angels, recruitment amongst the 18th Legion is an arduous process, yielding few new members. Each company recruits solely from the citizenry of their clan. As such, each company comprises solely of fellow clan members, bolstering their bonds of kinship, of unrivaled loyalty and respect. From the ages of 6 to 8, prospective Nocturne recruits work within the forge of a Salamander's Space Marine. Monitored for signs of talent, the initiates will work for years under the tutelage of the Astartes, and should they show promise, be cross-examined by the chapter's apothecaries and chaplains. The chosen few undergo the first stages of organ implantation, receiving further procedures as they endure and accomplish the trials set before them. Molded in the image of their Primarch, the neophytes will be set tasks replicating the feats of their Genefather's youth, culminating in the trial of hunting a salamander, honoring the original contest between Vulcan and the Emperor of Mankind. As a Codex Astartes compliant chapter, the Salamanders adhere to the doctrine of 10 companies, numbering 1,000 Space Marines. Equipped with armor and weaponry often crafted by their own hand, the Astartes of the Salamanders chapter are revered for their skill at the forge. Their war gear regularly adorned with symbols of scales, anvils, flames, and the iconic Salamander's Drakes of Nocturne. Their armor a bright green hue, often marked with a golden aquila on the chestplate. Their right pauldrons displaying their tactical designation, whether it be battle line, close support, fire support, veteran, or command staff. The battle and reserve companies adding a low Gothic numeral of their designated role to assign their squad. Their company is shown on the left shoulder plate, each company represented with the head of a large salamander with contrasting colors to identify their company as outlined by the Codex Astartes. Yet the 18th Legion retains its custom of dividing their number amongst 7 warrior houses akin to their original Legion structure. Each company inhabits one of the great settlements of Nocturne and comprises of 12 battle squads as standard, with the chapter master of the Salamanders directly overseeing and eschewing the need for a company captain by commanding the first company, the Fire Drakes. Comprised entirely of veteran warriors of the Legion and paragons of their values, the Fire Drakes are armed with Terminator armor, Stern Guard veterans, and venerable dreadnoughts. Fielding no barracks, the first company reside within the chapter's fortress monastery on Nocturne's moon of Prometheus, directing training cadres, coordinating security protocols, and maintaining the honor guard of the chapter. The senior lieutenants of the chapter master undertake much of the chapter's leadership duties. The second company, the Defenders of Nocturne, aid the most vulnerable subjects of the Imperium. Often protecting Imperial citizenry, such as factory workers, the second company is often ready to aid allied Imperial forces, such as the Astra Militarum or Night Houses, boosting the morale of Imperium forces and undertaking leadership roles during deployment. The third company, the Pyroclasts, are synonymous with flame weaponry, rooting out entrenched enemy positions and purging heretics and Xenos alike with holy fire. The third company also bear the burden of cleansing populaces of corrupted sympathizers of Xenos, forever balanced on the knife edge of adhering to the Promethean creed and teachings of Vulcan. The fourth company, the Branded, serve the chapter as their bastion of faith. Closely tied to the chapter's reclusiasm, the members of the fourth company compulsively and ritualistically brand their flesh as a show of faith to their beliefs. Specializing in close quarters combat, the fourth company's large composition of chaplains fill the company's spirits with unmatched zealous fury. The Fifth Company, the Drake Hunters, are renowned for their ability to fell gargantuan Xenos and enemy fortifications. Respected hunters of nocturne salamander drakes, the Reserve Company rarely fight as a consolidated company, rather supplying their members to bolster the four battle companies during protracted campaigns. Favoring mobile weapon platforms and static defenses, the Fifth Company squad employs a large number of dreadnoughts and an extensive variety of gunships and attack crafts. The Sixth Company, the Flame Hammers, are composed of fast-moving transports armed with heavy firepower. The first company to comprise Space Marines who have fulfilled their duty as Scout Marines, the Flame Hammers enable the deployment and evacuation of squadrons within the thick of battle. And finally, the Seventh Company, the Sons of Nocturne, consist of Vanguard and Scout Marines. Complying to the exacting standards of the Codex Astartes neophyte training regimes, the Sons of Nocturne spill their blood and prove their mettle in the name of their Primarch, so that one day they shall don the full plate armor and heraldry of their battle brothers, their reformation relatively new to the chapter, since its abandonment prior to the second founding of the Adeptus Astartes. Each Salamander Astartes rank is denoted by their helmet coloring, with sergeants painting a white skull, veteran sergeants a white skull with a crown of fire, lieutenants' helms show a white skull with a centered stripe, and captains bear more ornate helmets centered with the white skull. Their right pauldrons additionally denoting their rank. Specialized roles within the chapter also adhere to the guidance of the Codex Astartes. Chaplains paint their armor in the black of the Reclusiasm, and librarians paint their armor blue, both alike to their cousin chapters' customs, whilst the chapter's Tech Marines deviate slightly from their fellow Loyalist chapters by only painting their arms in the red heraldry of Mars whilst retaining the green armor of their chapter. Deviating further from the Codex Astartes, the chapter maintains not one, but 3 Masters of the Forge, enabling the chapter to effectively maintain their machinery, panoplies of war, weapons, artifacts, and honoring their heritage as Masters of the craft of weaponsmithing. The chapter master is given the utmost command of the chapter, yet maintains the Pantheon Council to provide support and discussion on the appointments of its members and campaigns fought across the stars. Their master of the fleet known as the Lord of the Burning Skies, commanding their battle barges and strike cruisers to enact the will of the Imperium on distant worlds and battlefields. For the Sons of Nocturne shall cleanse a path through the filth of the galaxy, their embers of their homeworld revivifying their morale and courageous charges into the dark corners of far-flung worlds.
He saw Vitrus and Aperos talking to the 2 sergeants who had just arrived. That was the opportunity he had been seeking. He moved toward them, walking softly over the cobbled surface of the courtyard, doing his best to be inconspicuous. As he drew near, the Space Marines removed their helmets, and he felt a rush of satisfaction and terror. That there were mutations in the ranks of the Black Dragons was no secret. The Dragon Claws assault teams were composed entirely of Space Marines whose osmodular zygote had gone berserk. The implanted organ was responsible for the enormous size and strength of Adeptus Astartes skeletons, but in the case of the Claws, it didn't know where to stop. The bones kept developing, most visibly in the form of outgrowths on the skull, and, most effectively, for combat, as blades, some of them retractable, in the forearm. As far as Lettinger and many of his Ordo Malleus colleagues were concerned, it simply wasn't possible that such a desirable mutation could be a chance development. Gene tampering was tainting the Black Dragons. Yet when the chapter, reluctantly, submitted its tithe of genetic material, the samples were always of a purity beyond reproach. They were too good to be true, as suspicious in their own way as the Bone Blades. Inquisition, in the person of Werner Lettinger, was deep in the Dragon's Second Company, and the warp take him if he didn't find the means to launch a full, formal investigation against this Emperor-forsaken result of the cursed founding of M36. As he took in Sergeants Volos and Toharon, he felt the locks to the Dragon's secrets tumbling open beneath his hands. Though he didn't have any formal proof, he could see how the gene tithe passed the examinations. Toharon showed no sign of mutation at all. Underneath a mane of blonde hair, his forehead was unblemished by disfiguring crest. His skin tone was lighter than that of the other dragons Lettinger had seen. The norm was dark, lending credence to the theory that the dragons were debased derivations of the salamanders. But Toharin's flesh had a glow that was almost human. All the dragons would have to do to satisfy the tithing demands would be to send in material drawn from Toharin and others like him. He was, Lettinger realized, a very special kind of mutant, the aberrantly pure-born in a world of monsters. And beside him stood the supreme monster. More than 3 meters tall, Volos loomed over every other living being in the courtyard. He was so gigantic that he wore custom-made armor and used an oversized jump pack for lift. His eyes were black, glinting pits of obsidian looking out from dark grey. Leathery hide whose overlapping ridges looked disturbingly like scales. His razored horn dispensed with all pretense, as far as Lettinger was concerned, of being anything other than demonic. When he spoke to Vretrus, his fangs poked out over his lower lip. As Lettinger watched, the 2 space marines, each for a moment, returned his stare. Toharin looked him up and down, his eyes pausing for a cold second at the inquisitorial rosette on Lettinger's breast before moving up to his face and favoring him with an expression of absolute hostility and contempt. Volos barely glanced at him, and though he showed none of Toharin's antagonism, his indifference was worse. It told Lettinger that he was beneath notice. He wasn't even an irritant, merely a detail on the landscape. The Black Dragons are a successor chapter of the Salamanders. Among the 21st founding of the Adeptus Astartes, infamous as the so-called Cursed Founding, the efforts of the Adeptus Mechanicus to harness and improve the inherent gene seed characteristics of several chapters of the Astartes ended in failure. During 991.M35, alongside the Minotaurs, Lamenters, Firehawks, Flame Falcons, Sons of Antaeus, and Blood Gorgons, the Black Dragons endured the experimentations of the Adepts of Mars, preceding the impending Age of Apostasy. Mutations ravaged the chapters of the Cursed Founding, causing many sired from such experiments to be corrupted by chaos, causing their legacies to be redacted from Imperial history. The mutations of the Black Dragons by far the most pronounced of their kindred, the bones of their arms rupturing from their skin into blade-like appendages, signs of other growths from their heads and forearms, incurred censure from the Inquisition. The insides of their mouths discolored to black, and tongues forming into pointed dagger-like muscles. The poisonous fangs which protrude from their jaws strike fear into the hearts of mortal men. Difficult to work alongside due to their terrifying appearance, several chapters, such as the Dark Angels and Marines Malevolent, refuse to ever fight by their side. Though much of their campaigns have been forgotten with time due to the direct actions of the Emperor's Holy Inquisition and Departamento Munitorum, among their most fell encounters occurred during the year of 232.M40. Enacted by the homunculi Hex Coven of the Drukhari, who sought to learn from the fell deeds of the 21st Founding, the Lords of Pain took a keen interest in the mutated sons of Vulcan during the skirmish known as the Bone Curse. Bargaining with the piratical Duke, Sliskus, the Dark Eldar ambushed the chapter within the Donorian system during their purge of the monsters infesting the sector. Both within the void of space and upon the worlds of Donorian, Sliskus sacrificed many of his voidcraft in order to capture a dozen space marines of the chapter, the Covenants of the homunculi returning their prize to the accursed realm of the Dark City. Within the deepest depths of Komorra, the Fleshcrafters began their agonizing experiments upon the flesh of the Astartes, recapturing their victims on no less than 8 of their attempts to escape during their 3-year confinement. Synthesizing the distilled essence of the Black Dragon's mutations, the Oseovirus, introduced back into one of the victims, spawned what can only be described as a twisted dragon of bone, its macabre form enshrined above the Coven's Chamber of Whispers to this day. Present during the death of antagonists, and committing 9 of its 10 companies to aid the defense of the Third War for Armageddon, regardless of their valor in preserving the innocence of the Imperium, many still do not trust these unfortunate souls. Seeing the mutations of their osmodular zygote organ to be assigned to be championed, each Astartes bearing such gifts are assigned to the Dragon Claw squads, equipped with jump packs for aerial assault. Their mutation said to be encouraged by the efforts of the chapter's apothecaries. Many speculate the apothecarian to implant aberrant gene seed into their aspirants. Tithing 5% of their gene seed to the Adeptus Mechanicus, alike to all chapters of the Angels of Death, the cult Mechanicus has threatened the chapter on numerous occasions, for in their eyes, the chapter stalls tithes until gathering sufficient gene seed, uncorrupted by their gene flaws, in order to avoid censure. Tattooing over their scars caused by the outgrowths of their bones and injuries sustained prior to their ascension as Astartes. Those afflicted by their curse sharpened the bones of their arms and sheathed them in adamantium, the tech artificers of the chapter modifying their armor of such mutated kinsmen with ports to allow for their retractable weapons. Clad in jet black ceramite, adorned with white chest aquillas and tactical markings on their right pauldrons, the chapter paints their right knee plate in the prescribed color scheme of the Codex Astartes to mark their company, with white high Gothic numerals centered on the designs to signify their squad. The symbol of their chapter, a white stylized dragon head on a field of black, is regarded as an ill omen by all who see it, whether friend or foe. Their aid given during the Indomitus Crusade under the command of Captain John Tanner, earning the chapter a slight reprieve from the watchful eye of the Inquisition. The Black Dragons continue to fight the enemies of humanity, no matter the miseries they suffer. The Black Vipers are an Ultima founding successor chapter of the Salamanders. Kept secret from their primogenitor for several years following their founding, with the Salamanders learning of their existence, Chaplain Sergosi embarked to spread the teachings of the Promethean cult to his kinsmen. Hearing no word from their pilgrimaging chaplain since, none know the fate of the spiritual exemplar of Nocturne, nor if his teachings reached these morbid warriors. Antisocial and spurning all contact with those they collaborate with on the field of war, the Vipers have made no efforts to bolster camaraderie with the many branches of the Adeptus Astartes or Astra Militarum. Clad in black ceramite, trimmed with red backpacks, knee plates, chest aquillas and pauldron trim, each Astartes stencils their tactical role with red paint on their right pauldron, identifying their squad with red low-Gothic numerals within the design of their tactical role. Each battle brother similarly uses black low-Gothic numerals on their left knee plate to mark their squad. The symbol of their chapter, a red viper's head on a field of black, belies their nature as deadly hunters. Stalking the darkest depths of the void in search of prey, the Black Vipers continue to fight alone as the agents of Belisarius Cawl attempt to monitor their progress. The Covenant of Fire are an Ultima founding successor chapter of the Salamanders. Yearning for knowledge of the Imperium's past glories and secret lore, the chapter seeks to bring light to the darkness of the void through intellectual enlightenment. Purging heretics with holy flame wherever it lurks, their primogenitor's dispatch of chaplains to teach their descendants of the Promethean cult has only encouraged their proclivity to incinerate all documents that contradict their beliefs. Clad in orange ceramite adorned with black helmets, pauldrons and arm plating, each battle brother adopts golden chest aquillas and pauldron trim to their regalia. Assigning their tactical role on black left knee plates with yellow markings, the chapter likewise designates their squad with yellow low Gothic numerals on their right pauldrons. The symbol of their chapter, an open tome of knowledge set ablaze with fire. Some of the more scrupulous historians of the Imperium are wary of its stark similarity to the icon of the arch-betrayers, the Word-Bearers. Enacting libricide of all knowledge deemed heretical in the eyes of the God Emperor of mankind, these zealous sons of Vulcan attempt to emancipate humanity from the fell influence of chaos. The Dark Krakens are an Ultima founding successor chapter of the Salamanders. Veterans among their ranks, drawn from the unnumbered sons of Rabute Guilliman, their service fighting as Grey Shields of the Era Indomitors has allowed for their hard-won experience to bolster their chapter's effectiveness. Once informed of the existence of the Dark Krakens, their primogenitor, the Salamanders, dispatched a senior chaplain to their homeworld of Catus in order to impart the teachings of the Promethean cult to their brethren. The peoples of the planet, hunting myriad creatures of the vast oceans of Noctis for food and sport, the chapter has in turn incorporated the culture of their homeworld into their character. Facing the Orcs and Tyranids during the Octarius War within the Pancalis subsector, the Dark Krakens defended the Bianzir Hollow system following the fall of the Cordon in Penetra. Aiding the Wolfspear chapter, Astra Militarum, and Deathwatch of Watch Fortress Eye of Octus, the Dark Krakens under the command of their chapter master, Mezoniki Reo, sought to drive back the Xenos. Masters of hunting the gargantuan native wildlife of their homeworld, such as the Megabasilosaurs of the Kesarami Ocean, these sons of Vulcan stemmed the tide of aliens during the Battle of the Night of 100 Horrors. Surviving months of grueling combat against the Tyranids, the chapter has earned great respect from the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Xenos for their valor combating the Great Devourer. Clad in black ceramite, adorned with grey iron chestaquillas, purple pauldron insets, and arm plating, the chapter marks its tactical role with red paint on their right pauldron, marking their squad number with white High Gothic numerals on such designs. Utilizing strange symbols to mark their greatest glories, such as the Death Clamp, Fang Coil, Hammerhead, and Hydra Serpens, such pagan symbols are reminders not only of glorious victories, but also bitter defeats and shames which must be absolved. The symbol of their chapter, a white kraken on a field of purple, epitomizes their nature as hunters of the most colossal and dangerous foes. Resolute in facing the most monstrous enemies of the Imperium, the Dark Krakens keep their blades sharp to better hunt malevolent Xenos and heretics alike. The Dragon Spears are an Ultima founding successor chapter of the Salamanders. Gloried for their joint campaign fighting alongside the Space Wolves chapter against the Orcs of the Narian Reef, these descendants of Vulcan have become experts at hunting the Greenskins. Taught the teachings of the Promethean cult from their primogenitor upon learning of their genetic ties, due to the Dragon Spear's standing as a fleet-based chapter, their ranks had for many years conducted strange practices such as rituals of self-sacrifice and cannibalism of their fallen battle brothers in order to retain their legacies. Absorbing their dead kinsmen's memories by virtue of their omophagia-implanted organs, their inherited expertise in battle has aided in their effectiveness during the Prosperan Rift War and Chancellor's suppression. Clad in pale cyan ceramite, adorned with black helmet stripes and white chestaquillas, the chapter marks their tactical role in their right pauldron with black low Gothic numerals centered on the designs to identify their squad. The symbol of their chapter, two crossed black spears atop a white shield, exemplifies their noble duty to defend the innocence of the Imperium. Earning an oath of brotherhood whilst fighting alongside the Vilka Fenrika, the chapter upholds their pledge to fight at the side of their comrades during the Great War of Gazgul Mag Uruk Fraka.
The Giants' ways are ancient, though their origins are lost to the ravaging inferno of time. I witnessed their neophytes on Tarqua being led in what their sergeant called the Doctrine of Ash, and felt a sliver of recognition. My old sergeant of the 7th was as patient and wise, and I knew then the strength of our allies.
The Storm Giants are a successor chapter of the Salamanders. Renowned for their service made during the Second Purging of Lustrati and Third War for Armageddon, these towering giants prefer the forefront of battle in the thickest of fighting. Cited as experts of rapid artillery-supported insursions, their use of tactical marines in pincer strike maneuvers is the envy of many of their peers. Clad in tan ceramite, adorned with red chest aquillas, the chapter marks their tactical role with red paint on their right pauldron, centering black high Gothic numerals on such designs to signify their squad. The symbol of their chapter, a red thunderbolt on a field of tan, epitomizes their tendency to rush enemy positions and strike alike to a sudden clash of lightning. Refusing to tithe gene seed samples to the magi genitors of the Mechanicus of Mars for study, these hulking warriors use their abnormally heightened strength for a typical Astartes to lay low the enemies of his Imperium and protect the innocent. This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The Sons of Vulcan continue to uphold the legacy of their Primarch by defending the innocence of the Imperium. Though not all successors of the 18th Legion adhere to the tenets of the Promethean Creed, the majority regardless look to the teachings of the Lord of Drakes as they continue to wage war across the stars. Though the practice of kindness and compassion are exploitable weaknesses, they regardless shall earn you the respect and adoration of your peers. For in the darkest of days, you shall need allies to stand by your side, and you shall bolster your bonds of camaraderie with continued acts of empathy to those in need.